Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we're talking about Superman Legacy. Superman Legacy is a movie that is, well, it's on the way, and they've been working on it for, I don't know, at this point, like almost 2 years. It seems like James Gunn has been working on it all his life. It's his dream project. And there have been a lot of casting announcements, right? So we have had a number of casting announcements. We've, of course, got David Cornsweet, who's going to be our new Superman. We have got Rachel Brosnahan, who's going to be playing Lois Lane. We have had announcements for a number of other characters who are going to be in the movie. And so today we're going to be discussing, well, not just Superman, but we're going to be talking about Team Superman. So to do that with me today, I've got John. So how are you doing today, John?
I'm doing very well.
That's awesome. Well, John, I wanted to ask you, how much does the supporting cast of Superman Legacy really matter? And that might seem like a trivial question at first, but the reason why I ask it and frame it as such is because I'm wondering like whether this movie is going to truly rely on a lot of those supporting cast members to tell to tell a cohesive story that brings you into a living and breathing DCU for the very first time. Because like Man of Steel, like is a movie that had, in my opinion, a fantastic supporting cast, but the movie spent a lot of its time with like Superman, like Clark Kent is just a loner, because that's what
Yeah.
that movie's version of Clark Kent was, and so he kind of goes through many periods of his life and kind of almost like in a Jack Reacher esque way, where he's just sort of passing through town, working random jobs, running into people who want to test his patience and perhaps his temper, and then eventually he finds his way in the present day with Lois Lane, and by that time his father's gone. So we kind of go through a lot of the movie in flashbacks, and it sort of goes back and forth. And
Right.
ultimately, when you look at it, the supporting cast around Superman in that movie, around Clark Kent, you can probably count them on two hands, if that. And including both versions of his father. I personally like really love the supporting cast in that movie. But the one thing that that movie wasn't really designed to do was necessarily launch a whole cinematic universe, and
Exactly.
and that's a big weight to carry. Then of course they tried to ram in a ton of supporting cast in BVS and Batman vs Superman, and that movie I think got a little too crowded. Even if you watch the Ultimate Edition, I think that movie still has a
Yeah.
lot happening for 1 3.5 hour trip to the movies. So when you look at that and you compare it to Superman Legacy, of course, James Gunn is coming over from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies that he has been doing at Marvel. We know that he can handle a big cast and he can tell a cohesive story with a lot of big key role players or stars, and basically he knows how to handle an ensemble cast. So I wanted to ask you, like, how much do you think the supporting cast, which I'm colloquially calling Team Superman in the spirit of the Arrowverse, where there was a Team Flash, there was a Team Arrow, and everybody had a team. I mean, hopefully not everybody's gonna get Superman's powers, but there will be a lot of people, and the casting announcements so far not only show us that there will be a lot of people, there'll be a lot of super people around Superman. So
hmm
what are your thoughts on where that supporting cast stands, and then how much value do you think they're going to bring to this movie, not just for the sake of this movie and telling the story of this Superman, but also giving us that introduction into the world of the DCU, which when we enter it, it's not like it's just beginning. It feels like the world. I think the goals that James Gunn has is this is going to be a world where superheroes exist, have existed
hmm
for a while, and people are sort of familiar with them as a concept. Like it's very different than what the MCU was when it first started. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I think I think the supporting cast for Superman is just really integral to the character. Yeah, obviously Superman is important and um Lois Lane. Those are the biggest ones. Lois Lane and Superman. That I mean, you have a literally have a TV show called Superman and Lois. Two of them actually. So it's obviously that dynamic is, of course, incredibly important, but what we kind of almost forget about is that not everybody, but that supporting cast. And I'm talking about mainly the Kents and the Daily Planet. Now, obviously, we didn't get a lot of Daily Planet in Man of Steel because that wasn't the intention. It's this is apples and oranges at this point. It's sure the through line is Superman, yes, but it's way different interpretations of the character, and that's great. But I feel like, okay, so this is so different. Let's try to be as different as we can. And we need that ensemble for Superman. Now, as long as, Lois Lane isn't saying we are Superman and that kind of thing, as long as it doesn't go that far in that in that space.
Yeah.
But we need to get, obviously, like the two we've gotten, well, two in terms of those Lois Lane, that Lois Lane and Superman, Corn Sweat and Brosnahan, pitch perfect. Skylar Gazzondo, looks and sounds great as Jimmy Olsen. I think that's pitch perfect casting. Jimmy Olsen is definitely the biggest one because he is the audience surrogate. So he is Superman's pal. Like, we see us as him because we want to be friends with Superman. We want him in our lives, giving us hope, giving us this the greatness we aspire to be, and that sort of thing. And so the fact that they got Jimmy Olsen, okay, that makes me excited. That makes me really happy because uh James Gunn understands the importance of Jimmy Olsen. So with that, that definitely extends to all these colorful characters that we've seen, whether we've seen them or we haven't. We've gotten Perry White in pretty much every single, iteration of the character. He's obviously very important, but we haven't got that casting yet. Hopefully soon we will get our Perry White. And then I think it's just as important as Steve Lombard, who we've seen maybe a couple times. Ron Troop and Cat Grant. That's kind of like the trifecta of those characters. There's plenty, plenty, plenty more. But I think getting those characters right, because they give us something. Each of their personalities are so different from one another and are so they give us sort of like different aspects on how Clark Kent will handle them or how Superman will handle them. And we're getting that wide range of emotions and wide range of personalities that really need to build this character of Superman. Because as you said, as we all know, Man of Steel wasn't supposed to start a cinematic universe. It's just WB really wanted one. So that was the intention, was like, okay, we'll just do this realistic Superman, but then WB's like, oh no, we got to build something on top of that. It's like, well, that wasn't the intention. Now
Yeah.
we're building a cinematic universe. Now we're building this. So it's like, okay, let's build it. Now the superhero characters like Hawk Girl and Mr. Terrific and Green Lantern are a little iffy, but he did say that those are probably not going to be, those are going to be like maybe cameos at best, maybe just really, really small roles. But I think that also kind of adds into it, that sort of, building that universe. I know we keep saying that, but building the universe, because James Gunn saw the faults of what WB, how it handled Man of Steel, and how that wasn't supposed to be what it eventually became. So he's like, okay, whether it's too extreme, it depends on the person. Some people are like, okay, that he's adding way too many characters and that kind of thing. But I don't think that's the case. I think those are the superhero characters are just small, and we're just gonna be, dealing with them like, oh, Clark Kent's like, hey, how you doing? And then, oh, hi, Guy Gardner. Okay, bye. Um, but the main thing that I wanted to really talk about was the Daily Planet, because that is something that is it's too integral to the Superman character, and you need to get that right. You need to have all these characters, have all these personalities, and then on top of that, make sure that chemistry works. Obviously, as I said before, Superman and Lois, that chemistry needs to work. But you also need to have this wide range of characters: Olsen, White, Grant, Troop, and Lombard, because it's kind of, it reminds me of, this is sort of the be all and end all of ensemble casts that work the best in terms of chemistry, is Aliens. Aliens is such a pitch perfect cast. They have pitch perfect chemistry with one another, and that works. And you need to like pretty much just take that, put it into Superman almost. Just take that perfect chemistry between one another. Like, obviously, you're gonna have, like, a Clark Kent, maybe a little bit more modernized as opposed to, the Christopher Reeve version who was, like, so mousy and quiet, but someone who, he needs to have a dynamic with Cat Grant. He needs to have a dynamic with Ron Tripp. He needs to have a dynamic with Jimmy Olsen. He needs to have a dynamic with these characters and then with each other. Like, it really building that sort of, like, workplace environment that, again, can feed into that relatability for the audience. Now, as well as the fact, obviously, the Kents, that's a no-brainer, um, because a lot of people were, unhappy with Kevin Costner's portrayal, but I think, getting those 2 characters really right obviously works because it seems like we are going to be getting a little bit more of them than, here, and I think, personally, to make it stand out, make it more like the post-crisis Superman Kents, where both parents are alive, because to really differentiate it, because I believe the only versions to really do that, at least in live action, I think it's Lois and Clark, because that obviously came right after, Crisis on Infinite Earths and trying to adapt the comics at the time, as well as like the animated series and that sort of thing. But in terms of live action, it's really only Lois and Clark. And I think to get that, you really need to have that chemistry, not only with the two of them, obviously both Ma and Pa Kent, but with Superman as well. And not just like a kid Superman, because Kevin Costner was quite good with, the younger actors of Superman. But I think if they are gonna go for a more post-crisis adaptation, I think it would be really awesome, really great to get a lot of scenes with Paul Kent and Superman, really build the dynamic and what makes it work. Because, I mean, we've gotten so much in terms of, like, teenage Superman, but he eventually dies, like Smallville, for instance. But I think post-crisis would be the best course of action, and I think, obviously nailing the dynamic and chemistry. And that's like the 2 biggest things, I think. Like, you really need to get right with this adaptation because, as you said, Loner Superman, that was good for Zack Snyder's interpretation, but in order to, like, really building that environment, whether that be a workplace or a home or a, relationship, obviously, like Superman and Lois Lane, you need to get all these different dynamics. Sure, for many people, that could be, "Oh, it's too overstuffed," but as long as you make it work properly, then I think that would really, really be the best thing about this movie, is not Superman and not Lois Lane, but Superman's pals, Superman's, support force behind them. Whether they don't like him or like him, I mean, like, sort of like almost like metaphorically supporting him, not like emotionally, but just like supporting the character and what makes Superman Superman. And those characters can really help that and needs to be integral for this film and this obviously cinematic universe.
Yeah, and to me, like the supporting cast in Man of Steel, just kind of quickly going back, I thought the supporting cast in Man of Steel was fantastic because what they had there was for the story that they were trying to tell. Uh, I mean, look, just the billing alone, you got. I mean, isn't it kind of epic that Superman's got that? Well, he's got 2 dads, but like one of them is played by Kevin Costner, the other one's played by Russell Crowe. I've never seen a more all-star. Like, I mean, and Diane Lane's one of her parents. I mean, and I'm forgetting the name of the actress who played her Kryptonian, like her his birth mother, but she's only there for like a short period of time. But
Yeah.
like,
She played
ultimate.
Vanessa in Daredevil. I don't remember the actress's name though.
Yeah, but, like, ultimately, like, that whole, like, Superman, like, sorry, Man of Steel was such a I think at the time, a movie that was very groundbreaking, and it was ahead of its time. Because I mean, and that's one of the reasons I think that it didn't connect with the audiences as much because there were people were expecting something very specific. And I think on purpose, David, Goyer and Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder had something in mind that was not by accident, but very much on purpose, something drastically different than anything that had come before. So I think it just, and we ended up in a situation where maybe it wasn't the most popular version, but they ended up moving forward with it. And whereas the supporting cast played a crucial role in telling Superman's story in Man of Steel, a lot of the Superman supporting cast kind of got minimized in BVS. So I think that there was a significant effect. Like I miss Perry White, or like
Yeah,
he became a caricature, like you mentioned.
yeah.
But I mean, like he was just like pointing at things and doing. It was really not ideal. And then even like Lois Lane's role like got reduced like further and further as we got into the bigger team up movies, which I understand. Like the team up movies are about the team more so than they're about the
Mhm.
the supporting cast members. But it's still I think the lack of planning in the past had been an issue, and they were sort of like retroactively trying to make the pieces fit. And whether it's the fake mustache or whatever number of other things that went wrong with that DCEU franchise, uh, ultimately I enjoyed the people that they cast in those roles. And moving forward, I personally am looking forward to what we're gonna see with David Cornsweet and the team around him.
Mhm.
I really want to see what Guy Gardner's Green Lantern turns into. We know he's not gonna get killed off because James Gunn. I mean, unless he's messing with it, and he does. I mean, can you imagine though if like the Authority wipes out, um, that wipes out like a lantern in the first movie in this new
Oof.
DCU? That's gonna, because
That would be heavy. Like, all
that would be
5
heavy.
Guy Gardner fans are gonna be pissed,
All
you know?
five. Which is probably why James Gunn decided to like make the TV show about like the two more popular lanterns that are not Guy
Yeah.
Gardner.
Although I love Guy Gardner.
Yeah.
I love all the Earth Green Lanterns, maybe except Simon Baz. I just feel like he hasn't been properly developed, but, all of them were relatively good, at least from where they are now. But, I mean, it would be kind of funny that, like, immediately Guy Gardner gets killed off because not a lot of people like Guy Gardner, but because, I mean, Nathan Fillion in The Suicide Squad as the detachable kid,
I was gonna
he's
mention that.
although James
Yeah.
Gunn did say he wasn't dead, so who
He
knows, like,
did.
what he wants to do. I think, like, maybe James Gunn just likes to almost kill Nathan Fillion in all of his movies, because I think, if I remember correctly, in Guardians 3, he didn't die either. I don't remember, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I think he
Yeah,
just
that's
likes to.
true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He sort of gets like, at some point you feel like he's gonna go, like because he's like the big ringleader of the
Third
opposing
time's the
forces.
charm, maybe? I don't
But
know,
I don't
but
know. Yeah, yeah. He. I look, honestly, I would love to see him show up in a bigger movie, and then you kill him off
I
with
I
like,
would I
just
because
save the
I do
gag.
like Guy Gardner. I like I
Yeah.
joke about, like, Guy Gardner fans, but, like, I do like Guy Gardner, especially because I think Rebirth did a lot of really good stuff for the Green Lanterns. Like Guy Gardner got a really good arc in terms of his backstory. Um, and then no, I'm not talking about Green Lantern Corps Rebirth. I'm talking about DC Rebirth, the one that came after New 52. Um, but and then Simon Baz did get developed. They kind of backpedaled a bit. That's why I've kind of been like icky about him a little bit. And then Jessica Cruz, who's personally my favorite Green Lantern, I immediately loved her character. I thought they did a really really good job with her.
She was meant to be
And
in that Green Lantern show before they rejigged it,
yeah,
right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Even though she's already played a DC character, Diane Guerrero, James Gunn, make it happen, please. Like, I know she's excellent as Crazy Jane, but Diane Guerrero as Jessica Cruz, she already voiced
Oh,
her.
you die for
Live
it. Yeah.
action would be awesome. I'm just saying, Gunn,
I would
make
have
it
loved
happen.
that. I actually am like, because I didn't know she was the one that was in the running. Now that because literally you mentioning it is the first time I'm hearing it, I'm like, man, they should. I need that to happen
Yeah.
because she was like my favorite part of the whole that whole show. Like Doom Patrol is full of great like characters and
Oh
act. I
yeah.
mean, it's. I don't want to say it's single handedly brought back Brendan Fraser, but like because it wasn't, it didn't. I mean, there were
It
other
did help.
projects.
It
It
did
did help.
majorly help.
It did exactly. Like, but like it's a show that definitely And not to mention, who's the what's the name of the character who's like wrapped up in all the bandages?
Uh,
I forget the name.
uh,
I did the character because he
negative
reminded.
negative man? No, wait.
Is that the Watchmen character? Isn't that the Watch? Or no, that's a different. I'm trying to.
Hold on. Wow, I am really it's not I think it yeah, I think it's negative man. I think that's what it is.
Well, regardless of the name of the character, I got to tell you, like Mad Bomber, like
Oh
he's
yeah,
somebody
he's
I've followed him since
yeah.
White Collar, like back in
I
when
never
USA
watched it, but I
Network.
heard that that was excellent.
That was a great show. Like I'm one of those people who are like, I love White Collar. I never got into Suits as much, and a lot more people got into Suits now. But like back when those shows were kind of airing at the same time, I was like a Burn Notice, Psych, and White Collar. That was my holy trinity of the USA net, like cable broadcast cable shows.
Never a Monk fan?
I was a Monk fan, but the Monk like ended a little bit before those shows came on,
Okay.
and so like
I
I
don't know
kind
the
of.
timing of those shows.
Yeah, like,
Maybe.
Monk was on, but, like, Monk was, like, on its way out as some of those shows were, like, really kicking into
Gotcha.
gear,
Okay.
and, like, White Collar came, like, much later than, like, even Burn Notice, because Burn Notice was, like, in its 6th or 7th season by the time White Collar started airing, and then Psych had already been up for, like, 5 years. So, anyway, but, like, Mad Bomber's been around for a while. He's been working
Oh
his
yeah,
way up
he
to
was
bigger and
my
bigger
choice for
roles.
Superman for a long time. He just has the face for it. He
He
has the
has the face.
charisma for it.
He's got the
He's
jawline,
got the
like, he's
jawline. He would be perfect. But the fact as negative man, I did look it up. It is negative because I always confuse, especially when I was playing through Marvel Spider-Man. I was like, oh, it's Mr. I kept calling him Mr. Negative. I'm like, no, that's the villain from Spider-Man, not no, it's Negative Man. So Negative Man, and then the Negative Spirit is the thing he releases. But yeah, Matt Bomer was so good in that role. I mean, all of them were just had really good chemistry with one another. Even though I didn't like that version of Cyborg like totally, Jovan Wade was really good in the role. I mean, he tried his
yeah.
best, and so um all I did, although Crazy Jane was the best. Like I didn't like her in like the third season and what I've seen of the fourth, but I still think she was definitely the best part of the show, along with Robot Man.
No, I agree with you. I think her character because let's be fair, like she didn't always have to play like 100 different people, but like the show would randomly just veer into, oh, Crazy Jane's going through 10 personalities in an episode. And every time that happened, I thoroughly, enjoyed those episodes.
Oh yeah,
They were a ton of fun. And I just, yeah, I think she's incredibly talented. I'm surprised you haven't seen her in more like big, properties since because she did such a fantastic job with that role. And I think not only her, but again, Matt Bomber. I mean, he's picked up a ton of projects. He was in American Horror Story for I think a season or two. He was in the Lady Gaga season, I think. Um, and then you have Brendan Fraser. I mean, and now he's got an Oscar on his mantle. And I'd like to think that Doom Patrol had a little bit to do with him getting
yeah,
there.
I'd like to
And of
think so.
and he, of course, he was part of that, infamously shelved Batgirl movie. So
Yeah, that was
there's a lot of
really the only reason I was gonna see that movie. I'm like, I don't
yeah.
care. Like, I just like everything about the production was just so complicated. I'm like, I don't really care about this movie, but I do care about my boy Brendan Fraser. So that is how I'm gonna see this movie. And maybe there's some brave soul that's gonna, you know, like go like have a quest to the WB vault and release it. Maybe I don't know. Probably not, but a man can dream, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's in the archives, it's, like, under lock and key, and when I say lock and key, I'm sure, like, there's probably, like, layers of encryption that you need a quantum computer to
Yeah,
break to even get access to a version of it, and it probably is stored in, like, pieces, it's not like you click
yeah,
one file and watch the whole movie. Um, and having said that, though, I mean, getting back to Superman Legacy, as far
yeah.
as Team Superman. I love when you said like as long as like Lois Lane doesn't say we are Superman, which
Oh god, yeah,
like there was some like lazy writing in the Arrowverse, especially once they got past the first few years, and it clearly looked like they had and I'm not like gonna rag on the creative team behind the shows because they had limited budgets and they had to
yeah.
produce 20 episode seasons, which is a ton of work to do.
Which is yeah, it's a lot.
Like
It's
it's
pretty
insane,
much
like
you get no breaks. I really feel for the actors with
Yeah,
that. I mean, I feel for all of them. It's just it's one thing for like the crew, but it's like they come to work kind of like I mean, all of them, God bless them. Like I don't know, like working on like network TV is just like I'm sure it's
like,
fun. I'm sure they still have a
yeah.
lot of fun. But sometimes when they reach that point and they pretty much have no breaks, especially with that many episodes, it's just like, oh God, like God bless them. Like they
It,
do the work I couldn't do.
and honestly, like I think it was kind of exacerbated by the fact that creatively the shows kind of got a little bankrupt towards the end.
Yeah.
Like for me, like if you remember back, and I don't know if because I think you are a fan of Star Trek, right? So as a Star Trek fan, I'm
Vaguely,
sure
yeah.
you
Yeah.
remember back in the 80s and 90s, like the next generation took, I think, like a good 2 to 3 seasons to really hit its
Oh,
groove.
yeah.
And then
Many
it was like,
fans have said that, like, the seasons 3 to 5 are, like those are,
yeah,
like, prime Star Trek, like, some of the best writing we ever got of that show,
yeah,
as well as a lot of Deep Space Nine. Those are, like, the cream of the crop in terms of Star Trek from what I
absolutely.
hear.
And I mean, not to mention, like, you could clearly tell they loosened up the costumes a little bit, and kind of they were a little more padded and a little so they can hold their shape, but they
Mm,
weren't like skin
not the
tight because you could
onesies.
tell they were like the actors were, I can imagine they were uncomfortable walking around in basically leotards, like full body suits, like all day for like probably these 10-hour days. But the point I was trying to make is if you remember, like, the Next Generation started airing in the 80s, and it went into, by the time it was in the early 90s, it was kinda it had hit its stride. But then, like, they started to do these spin-offs, and I like to think that while Voyager and Deep Space Nine were good shows, there was definitely a period where for a good 3 or 4 years, especially in the late 90s when the TNG movies started coming out, that the writing got, like, terrible because there was, and then when I say terrible, I'm like, "Look, okay, the terrible writing, there was some good, they would do some good stuff, but, like, there was a lot of, like, let's just do some sciencey jargon to explain our way out of a situation and invent some gadget to solve an impossible problem just for the episode that week." That then, you like to think like, oh, 10 episodes later, they could have used that same machine again for a different problem, but apparently the logic dictated that they do something entirely different. But like, and that's because the writers are not thinking that way. There wasn't a lot of long-term thinking. They were just like, we gotta like churn these episodes out. And when you have like 4 shows on the air versus 1 show on the air, and you're doing like movies, you're basically, you spread your creative talent a little thin because yeah, you may still have like your 3 star producers that are going to be doing your best work. But now that you have to produce like 5 shows, your
Exactly.
3 producers can only handle 1 show apiece. So you bring in maybe 2 other producers who previously would have just been in more supporting roles, but now they're also producing a show apiece, and the quality starts to kind of go down, and then you kind of stretch your talent thin. And I think that's what happened with the Arrowverse, where they ended up in a situation where we started getting like We Are Team or We Are Flash. Not
Yeah,
to mention,
essentially.
dude, literally, I feel like every single character minus Cisco by the end of that show. And no, forget it. Cisco had powers too. But like literally every member of like Barry Allen's family that he had some level of blood or by marriage relation to had like super speed powers, which was
Yeah.
insane.
Or
And then
just
he
any powers, like
like any
Cecilia, my friend, like, who stuck by the show I'm like, "Dude,
yeah.
why are you doing this?" My friend stuck by the show till season 9, and I'm
Oh
like,
my god.
"Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, "I need to complete it." I'm like, "Okay, I can respect that." Meanwhile, I gave up after, like, season 5,
Yeah.
and and he was like, "Why does Cecilia have powers?" And it's not even a set group of powers. It's like she just has something that's convenient for the episode because they
Yeah.
need her to fly this episode. Okay, she flies now. It's
She
like,
flies.
what are you talking about? What do you mean? This is ridiculous.
It was kinda like, how Riverdale got so ridiculous after the 1st season to the point
Mm.
where you listen to somebody describe to you what's going on in a given episode, you're like, "W I'm sorry, what did they do?" I'm
How
like,
they
it's
like
it's
multiverse of madness, the
I
like
it was
second to
it's it
last
was
season.
so
Like, what
stupid.
the fuck? fuck is that?
It's so stupid. I'm like, and you know what? Sometimes you watch those shows, you can suspension of disbelief can take you pretty far. But I'm like, some of the stuff that they do,
Mm,
it just you can't like for example, I think like Cisco's character sort of became this person who was like just in charge of inventing some impossible gadget to solve a villain of the week every
mhm,
week, and that happened for like 3 seasons in a row. I'm kind of like not surprised that I forget the name of the actor, like who he decided to leave the show because there wasn't really a lot of like creatively anything challenging, anything new ground being broken. It was sort of just like a cycle, and it seemed like for a while they just started building up to the next crossover, and then just go back to the same routine because they just need to fill out like as many from as few as 18 to as many as like 22, 23 episodes a season, which is a lot.
mhm.
And I think their budgets were not nearly high enough to sustain that because like yeah, in the 90s, the peak of network television when you had shows like the X Files or like the early 2000s, like Stargate, like Sci-Fi, the peak of sci, even Smallville, like their budgets kind of like were big enough to support a show that could creatively, as well as from a visual standpoint, keep up. And to the point where like today they're still looked back as classics, whereas I think the era was
Right.
sort of fell off the cliff. And to tie that back into Superman Legacy, I think the one thing a lot of people have been concerned about is the size of the supporting cast. That they're worried
Yes.
about like they keep adding like more and more people. How many are we going to get? And when you look at a lot of these other movies, like Man of Steel, for example, which is the last solo Superman movie that we got, that
Mhm,
movie, if you look at his IMDb page, has like a couple dozen characters easily. Just when you
yes.
describe like what you would call Team Superman, like he's got two sets of parents. That's four people right there. And then you've got like Lois Lane. You've got like the other people at the
Barry
Daily Mail.
White
So
and
not the
yeah.
Daily Mail. Why am I saying the Daily Planet? I'm confusing my universes now. Why do they like not the Daily Mail is the real world, and there's a whatever. There's so many like daily newspapers in the world of comics, but yeah, so you had like 5 or 6 people there, like, and then well, we didn't have Jimmy Olsen because apparently he worked for the CIA and was not even like a true journalist in the world of the DCEU. So when you add that up, you're already getting to like counting on two hands. And then when you start adding in like General Swanwick, his assistant who was fawning over Henry Cavill Superman, which was incredibly cute at the end of the movie, that I
Mm.
really hope they pay. I just one of those regrets. I wish they paid off that character with some sort of development down the road that never happened because we never got a Superman of Steel sequel. Um, so when I look at the cast for this movie, there's still, while we've already had like a good half a dozen or so characters cast, I can still see there being a ton more to come. And so I wanted to ask you, like, who do you see as still being on the horizon, and which of those characters are you most looking forward to seeing being cast, as well as if you have any fan castings or choices of your own in mind for those?
I think, obviously, you have to get the Kents in there, both Ma and Pa Kent, and I did say that try to go after the more post-crisis interpretation of both of them being alive, because it's just different. Like, at this point, we've seen honestly, we've probably seen Pa Kent die more than Uncle Ben at this point. Like, everyone makes fun of Uncle Ben I'm like, "Okay, we've only seen him, like, die, like, twice." Meanwhile, poor Pa Kent has died, like, at least 4 or 5 times at this point. So, I think just to keep it and to, like, up that, like, Superman beacon of hope thing, like, just have both parents be alive. It's different, it's interesting, it's a new dynamic that we haven't seen a lot of. God knows we haven't seen on the big screen before. So, to hell with it. Go with that. And then, and I think for me, I would love if I think, like, for Paul Kent, I would love to see, like, Kyle Chandler as in the role. I think he would do, like, a really good job. I just think, like, mainly due to his work on Friday Night Lights, I think, like, he's sort of like that commanding sort of, like, presence that could, like, be intelligent enough to, like, give, like, really good, like, advice, be fatherly, but, like, have, like, sort of that equal balance, I guess you could call it. So, you would have that. I think he would be really good, and then obviously with the I don't really have anyone for Ma Kent though. Like, I think, like, she would, uh, be great as well. I think, like, a Julianne Moore type would be really good for that. Um, I think, like, sort of like the more nurture, sort of thing of, like, instead of, "You don't know this world," the thing, like, kind of, try to be that more nurturing presence, both of them, obviously. And then you would have the Daily Planet. I think, oh my God, there's so many like great actors. You would honestly, for Perry White, like, it would be different for him, but I think he could nail it, like, someone like Jeff Bridges. Like, he's definitely older, but, like, I think, like, he would nail, like, something like that. Probably too famous, like, 'cause the thing is you think of, like, really famous actors. Like, yeah, and get, like, Steve Lombard, get, like, Glenn Powell or, like, someone like that to, like, do that. Ron Troop, get, like, maybe, like, a Chiwetel Ejiofor type, and I think he could like do something like that. Cat Grant, Hayden Panettiere has always been my number one for a Cat Grant, and like getting or like just getting someone in that like vibe, I guess, like no pun intended. But I think like just sort of getting into that like just dynamic of all those characters, I think would just be really really awesome, and really getting into if I were to if I were to do anybody else. Oh yeah, Jor-El and Lara Lorvan. I think in terms of those characters, James Gunn did say he wanted someone younger, which does make sense because I mean, he had a baby, like, and he wouldn't age with the holograms. So like getting someone in like their mid 30s would be really good. Just sort of like I don't know, like get someone like I don't know, just like a Keanu Reeves-esque character. Not actually Keanu Reeves, but like someone who could do like more stoic, like badassery, but like get like just someone who can be like that nice, caring nature. Even though I know he's like in his 50s at this point. Um, get someone like that, like in their mid to late 30s. I think that could be really awesome. Um, but yeah, like get like that vibe of characters. Like it just like they're too important to not have them. And like getting all of those characters, like hell, I would say get even more. Obviously, characters that wouldn't be as big as like those that trifecta and Perry White and Jimmy Olsen, obviously, but get someone who get like a couple of smaller named characters who could like just like offer something like just not just like a quick like walk on, be like, hey, bye, that kind of thing. So I think that could be like just really build in that environment of like lived in. I want to see lived in, and I want to see like I want to see all the parents alive. I want to see all this. I want to see a lot of this, just like everybody just having the most lived in world. I understand like it's only year 2 for Superman, but he the world existed before Superman, and I want to see that. I want to see that,
Yeah.
and I want to see that dynamic in this Brave New World that Gunn has for us next year. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
next year.
I love it. I mean, I think some of your picks for these casting is like really getting me like thinking now. It's like, oh, I would love
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves.
Obviously not
Oh, or
those, like, specific
yeah,
actors, like, just someone who gets, like, that, like, kinda like a
yeah.
similar vibe. Like, I would look because like, Jeff Bridges is, like, known for, like, chill, cool dudes to, like, smoke a lot of pot, like Lebowski. He just keeps playing
Well,
B
have you seen
Lebowski
him
over
in
and
The
over.
Old Man? Have you seen him in The Old
I
Man,
have
which is
not,
on
but that's been on my
dude,
list,
you
so
gotta watch that show, and it ends on a cliffhanger because they had to cut the season short because he had like he had I think he was battling some form of cancer, so he had to
yeah,
go
he
in for
was.
treatment, and then he came back and you could see like there's they had to stop filming, and then the last couple episodes they filmed after he came back from treatment. You could see he was like not as bulked up, but like so because of the treatments, and they had to cut the total number of episodes short. So some of the story, I feel like they were gonna wrap it up in that season, but I'm excited to see what season 2 looks like on which is I think Hulu on FX, which is now gonna be on Disney Plus. So like it's all under that Hulu Disney Plus thing.
Yeah. I
Um,
just he would be so good. Like he's maybe a little bit too old to get someone like maybe in their 50s, I think.
but
I
like who
think
would
he
you
would
you would want him to play one of the the father figures? Like whether
Oh,
it's
I would want him to be Perry White. Like
Perry
I
White.
just think that
Oh,
I think he would be like
dude, yeah.
I
I
mean,
could
to be fair, like my number one casting for Jor-El is someone way older, but Gunn has already said that he wants someone younger. But I would have loved to seen Scott Bakula. Speaking of Star Trek,
Oh,
I would love to see
damn.
Scott Bakula as
Yes.
Jor-El. I just think he would nail that character, like because I think he could have
Yes.
been a good Superman, like back in like the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
think like
Quantum
getting
Leap. I'm
someone,
like
yeah.
he had the he had he had the clout. Like
Oh
definitely.
yeah, so I and just like now, but I think like he's like too old for that sort of character. But I would if anything is realistic enough, Kyle Chandler as Pa Kent, Jonathan Kent, give us that because that's just too perfect casting right there. That's just too perfect.
Yeah. And then you mentioned what Hayden Panettiere for Cary
Cat Grant, yeah,
Cat Grant.
oh my god, she would just have like she does bitch really well. Like
And dude,
she's a
like
really good
for
actress, and
you
she
want to
was
talk about like target demographics though? Like sorry, like I didn't mean to cut you off, but like for those of us who grew up in the 2000s, I'm like, that's a home run casting because
yeah.
that brings
Essentially,
back
just
memories.
take Kirby from Scream 4, and then that's Cat
Yeah.
Grant. That's
Yes.
essentially Cat Grant.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and in a world where there's a Mean Girls reboot coming out, I think that not that you like, like those kind of characters. We don't see a lot of uh, characters like that in movies as much anymore. But like Cat Grant, I think on Supergirl, to be honest, like I thought that was one of the characters that did a pretty decent job with all around,
mhm,
and she kind of left the show before it really went off the rails because like
yeah,
her character was more involved in the shows on CBS, and then wanted to move to the CW. She was around for a little bit and then off and on. And I think like her character evolved from being just like this person that antagonized Supergirl to like becoming almost like this motherly figure that pushed her to do better.
yeah,
And they kind of didn't overdo it. They didn't overuse the character, and then it felt like the character had a nice arc. And ultimately, I think she makes a couple of cameos like later on, like before the show ends and stuff. So the execution of that character in the Arrowverse, I think, was very well done. Um, my I mean, honestly, like, some of your suggestions have now opened my mind because
yeah.
I've been so like, how can you beat Man of Steel's casting? Like, you got Russell Crowe and Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, and then again, I keep forgetting the name of the other actors, but like,
Lawrence Fishburne.
yeah, Lawrence Fishburne. You got like freaking Morpheus as Perry White. Like, why are you gonna be? I mean, you could maybe just cast Keanu Reeves and like, or what'd be great if Keanu Reeves does come back as Constantine and is part of this universe. Which I'll be like, here's
Unlikely,
the
but
thing. That supposedly that Constantine sequel is still floating somewhere in the ether. I don't think
yeah.
that ever. There's no nail in the coffin on that project yet. So you never know. But like, I wouldn't mind him playing like some other understated bat. I mean, this is probably not a good fit, but I think he could probably pull off the Martian Manhunter, or either that or
I
somebody who's
think
more of
he
a
could nail
street
that.
level hero.
I
You
think he
know.
could definitely nail Martian Manhunter because he kind of has like that vibe of like an alien almost,
Well, but
of
also
like
like
someone.
he's able to, through his understated performance, sort of exude like this sense of tortured spirit slash
Yeah,
hiding pain kind of a thing, which
yeah. In
we
terms of that,
get
I
in.
think yeah,
Yeah,
he would definitely do that. Keanu Reeves would just be so good. Like, but the thing is, like, I respect Keanu Reeves too much that I almost don't want to see him in any superhero movie because it's like you've gone this long without doing it. Like, I mean,
well, I
Constantine,
mean, but
yeah, but
yeah. Yeah.
but that like kind of almost doesn't count because I meant in terms of like I guess I mean in terms of like cinematic universe stuff like specifically.
Right.
Um but yeah, I would like to see him as more like um honestly he could probably do Ra's al Ghul really well. I think he could definitely do that.
Oh yeah, dude, he's not played a lot of villains, and that's something that
Yeah.
I wouldn't
I think he
mind.
tries to avoid villains, but I definitely think he could he could definitely do that because he's sort of like has like that ethnic look to him. I know it's probably not quote unquote ethnic enough, but I think he could, like, fit into that, like,
Well, yeah.
Ra's al Ghul sort of.
It also depends on the version of the character that you really
Yeah.
go with. I mean, here's the thing, to be quite honest, I find the comic book version of Ra's al Ghul sort of, like, racially stereotyped. Like,
Yeah, it
the
can
really
be
the
that, but
mustache
yeah, I
twirling, I'm
could see
like,
that.
it's in the
The
world
Fu
of, like,
Manchu type of
in
thing, yeah.
2023, like, you really are, like, kinda especially at a time when, the Chinese market and the Asian markets in general are a big part of the box office,
Mhm, yeah.
math and equation that studios have to calculate. You have to create a character that those audiences can relate to, and I think while calling him Ra's al Ghul and giving him the story and the portrayal that they did in the Dark Knight trilogy was fantastic. I think casting-wise, casting Liam Neeson for the role, maybe, like, if you do that today, you maybe will cast a different actor
Yeah.
who's maybe more like, maybe, like, do you go the direction of what they did with Shang-Chi? I think that you can cast, like, somebody from the cast of that movie and put them in there, and, like, I think Donnie Yen would be, like, a freaking I know he's not in Shang-Chi,
Yeah,
but, like,
because
Donnie Yen would be a
yeah,
great Ra's
that would
al
definitely
Ghul,
work. I've also
you
seen
know?
Ra's al Ghul be more Middle Eastern rather than East Asian specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can make both of those work. Get like a Donnie Yen or a Tony Leung could be definitely really good Ra's al Ghul, and then get someone. I know the guy. Oh, I'm blanking on his name, but I remember Gotham. The guy had a really good look, and then the guy who they got in the Arrowverse was really good. He's sort of like bordering into that like more Middle Eastern sort of thing. I've
Mhm.
seen that's just how I pictured it. Like the because like I picture like Nanda Parbat being in like
Well, because here's the thing, Nanda Parbat is, like, I think is based on the name is based on a real, like, that's from
yeah
the Indian like, that's from
yeah
Hindi.
Indian.
Nanda
So it's
Parbat
like
is,
kind
like,
of
how you would
vague.
pronounce it, like, it's completely butchered in the way they pronounce it in the DC Comics, but, like, that's, like, a real place, and it's basically I think the character would be based in the Himalayas where,
Yeah.
like, Nepal, India, Pakistan, China, and all those countries sort of meet up.
Yeah, so it's like you kinda
Um,
have like a almost like a
a
melting
mix,
pot for this character.
melted
You
pot,
could
yeah,
definitely make him Middle Eastern, Indian, or East Asian, like,
yeah.
you could or do all of them if you find an actor with all 3. I think you could kinda really, like, play with that, but
I'll
yeah.
put out a couple of options. One, well, okay, this is not gonna be possible because the actor has passed away years ago. But do you remember the villain? I think it was the second Indiana Jones movie. He was a big time Bollywood actor, Amrish
Yes, I
Puri,
know
I
who
think it was
I
his
don't
name,
know his name,
remember?
but I know exactly who you're talking about.
Right? He passed away years ago at this point, but I think if he was around today, he could have played a really
Oh,
cool,
yeah.
Ra's al Ghul. Or if they chose to do that character in the '90s versions of the Batman movies, maybe. Today, I think I would probably like if I were to look down at like the talent from like the incredibly talented Indian film industry. I think if I look in Bollywood, I would suggest to Bollywood fans out there, maybe like get Amir Khan, who's done a ton of like fantastic movies, and he actually did like an Indian version of Forrest Gump last year, which was like a
Mhm.
licensed. It wasn't like they just stole the concept. It was licensed from the studio that made Forrest Gump, and he's also done like a lot of other like fantastic award-winning fare over the last 10 years. And I think he's the kind of actor who can like really turn. He's sort of like Christian Bale-esque sort of an actor, like who will bulk up or slim down and really like become the character that he's gonna be, playing. So he could probably pull it off. And then I'm sure there's like a ton of other options. And then it all depends on how you're writing the character. Although I think that the Ra's al Ghul is the type of character who, much like Vandal Savage, you could make that character not just like a villain for Batman or Superman. You can make it a Justice League level villain.
Yeah, because I
Um,
believe he was Ra's al Ghul was in the original it was the original villain of Tower of Babel, so yeah, he could definitely be that
yeah,
big sort of villain, yeah, Vandal Savage, like, a lot of, like, big like, you can make a lot of those, like, big epic villains that usually are designated to one character, can be multiple or even a whole team, so
yeah. So let's just kind of finish this up, the whole conversation, and let me ask you really quickly because I know we've talked about this before, but like Sean Gunn, he's been, according to Deadline at least, and their inside sources, been cast as Maxwell Lord, previously played by, of course, America's Daddy, Pedro Pascal in the DCEU, who's moved on to bigger and better things, I suppose. But
Mr.
although
Fantastic.
I would love to see Pedro Pascal. Yeah, well, yes, I mean, well, that's not official yet technically, but
Oh, it isn't?
if
Okay, I thought it was
yeah,
official.
like because there's some potential scheduling conflicts with his other commitments with The Last of Us season 2, Gladiator 2, and those are like would probably take priority anyway. But I think that Sean Gunn being at least unofficially cast as Maxwell Lord, while there's been no confirmation that he's gonna be in Superman Legacy or what project he's gonna first show up in the new DCU, if he were to be a part of Superman Legacy, even as a background, secondary, tertiary character, just sort of like again being part of this already well-established world where superheroes exist, and so do their potential enemies and antagonists, and having read some of the threads comments that James Gunn made about the character of Max Lord to one of the writers who created the character back in one of the JLA comics, he sees him as like not necessarily like a villain, but more like an antagonist who sort of, which his comic book origins, he initially starts out as being like a big ally to the League, and then
Yeah.
eventually we find out his actual plans are much more nefarious. So my question to you is like, what do you think about Sean Gunn being potentially cast in the role, and then also how do you think he would fit into the picture of the DCU? And do you think he's going to show up in Superman Legacy? Is that where you think we're going to see him first, or are we going to have to wait a little while? Or maybe is he going to show up in like animated form in the Creature Commando show?
I think something really interesting, this is just my theory. I don't think he might show up as a small background player in um Superman Legacy. Like as sort of maybe like a friend of Lex Luthor, because obviously, or like maybe like a mentor because Sean Gunn is so much older and Nicholas Holt isn't. I know Nicholas Holt's like I think in his 30s at this point, but Sean Gunn is like I think in his like 50s. So maybe he could be like a mentor for Lex Luthor and like kind of mold him into the man he'll eventually become type of thing. They could do that. Actually, I just came up with that on the spot. Honestly, wouldn't mind seeing that. But I think
I like that idea.
my personal theory, I think they could do really good is like again because like it's sort of like just what I love that what people are doing now. Like it's easy to just adapt a comic. Like okay, we're making a this adaptation. We're making a No Man's Land adaptation. We're doing this. We're doing that. What I like what like really creative writers do is they take bits and pieces of different comics, different arcs, different characters, and just like really change them up and really like mold them into something that makes sense for the story they're making. And in this case, a cinematic universe. I think it would be really awesome if what they did is because if you remember, Justice League International was like the post-crisis Justice League, and like Maxwell Lord like helped form it and all that. I think it would be really awesome if they did that, but with the Authority. Like Maxwell Lord helps build the Authority.
And then maybe some of
Now,
those characters that we have seen announced, like Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner, um, maybe like do you think
maybe,
or
but
Hawk? Yeah,
what I'm thinking of, like maybe tries to start like a proto, like Justice League International type of thing, and it fails, and then he takes all these characters that are in normally in the Authority, like Midnight or Apollo, the Engineer, the Doctor, all that, and then he goes on to make the Authority, and like upping him to not like total villain status because he didn't like really become like a total villain until I believe one of the crises. I think it was Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis or Final Crisis. I don't remember. And but initially he was like pretty much an ally with maybe some like nefarious, like I'm a billionaire, so I'm not all good. I'm kind of corrupt, like kind of like that, where it's like kind of in between total villain and ally with maybe some like nefarious ideas, where he's like kind of like sees what Superman can be and sees like okay, he's obviously a good guy, but is not willing to go as far as you can with this. And like, okay, we need a team that can go as far, like who's willing to fucking murdered people. So I think that would be really cool. I think Maxwell Lord, him showing up in the Authority, and him essentially, instead of creating Justice League International, creating the Authority. That I think would be a really cool thing to do. And he would be like a major ally of the Authority.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very clever idea because the pieces are there. Like
Yeah.
you look at like the who they have cast, and I think that would be fantastic because then I can now actually in my head I can start to see a narrative form because you look at the villain that they've cast, you look at the fact that the Authority is going to have their own movie, they're going to be a big antagonistic force in the world of this universe, especially in like chapter one at least, and who knows maybe chapter two and beyond. I think that would be a great way to go about it. Also, if you look at the addition of the Terrific, I mean, I'm assuming they're gonna be make them the Terrifics. I think they're trying to maybe go in a direction where these, all these characters, kind of come at this from like different axes, and then Superman is sort of in the middle, trying to mediate these issues, and he's sort of on the outside looking in on the situation in the beginning. Because while we're not getting a true origin story, we still are getting like a Superman that hasn't really become world famous, the Superman that the world knows, like what we had by the time we got to Batman versus Superman, or the end of Man of Steel, where Superman, like, the day the world met Superman, kind of a deal. I don't think we have had anything of that level happen yet. Maybe he's just he's an urban legend at that point, or maybe people know him, and but his scope of like uh popularity is limited. Because I certainly hope that's the case, because I don't want to end up in a situation where I feel like we have missed half of Superman's journey as being the
Right.
Clark Kent as being Superman. I do want to start just early enough, and I think he's going for year one or year two, sort of like the Batman did. And then your point about also, the best comic book movies, I think, are the ones that don't just straight up adapt a comic book, but the ones that take inspiration from different areas. Sorry, I just got a cough. Something got stuck in my throat. Anyway,
Okay.
but basically, like the Batman did this with taking kind of Batman Year One, and then taking inspirations from a few other areas as well. Of course, we had a very different version of the Riddler. The Dark Knight did this. Even Batman versus Superman, which I think overdid this, but because they grabbed some of the two or three of the most iconic comic book stories and meshed them into one movie. But like that's where I think also like Zack Snyder saying like, if I come back, I'm gonna wanna do a Dark Knight Returns adaptation. I'm like, do you really want to just adapt that straight up? I mean, we got an animated movie that kind of
Yeah.
like
Two animated
does
movies.
the job. Two animated, like it does the job for people. Like like if you just want to watch it on screen instead of reading the comic book, there you go. But like I would like to see like a live action movie kind of go a little further. Like let's see something different. And I know that for a lot of people it wouldn't matter because most people probably haven't read the comics, so therefore it would still be something new to them. However, there's a reason why they call them adaptations, because a lot of these comic book stories don't quite, if you were to take them and literally translate them to a movie, they don't quite like play very well because they're not really
Yeah.
written for the medium of film.
Unless it's like animated, because I think
Yeah,
animation is like really good for like adapting straight stories. Some successfully, as we mentioned, Dark Knight Returns,
yeah,
Flashpoint Paradox. Some not, like Batman versus Robin. It's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But I think like or how the Tomorrowverse Superman, Man of Tomorrow adapted essentially Superman Earth 1. Like, I think, like, keep the animated stuff. Obviously, you can, like, do a lot of stuff with animation, and you can do, like, intriguing original stories and all that, but I feel like a lot of times animation's, like, really good for just adapting straight stories, maybe having a spin on it. Like, I know Gotham by Gaslight kind of combines both, Gotham by Gaslight, and then I think it's Master of the Future, which is its sequel. So I think, like, combining that is really good, and then, like, different aspects of, like, actual lore, and I think saving the animated movies for straight adaptations is way better because you can, like, adapt panel for panel in
yeah,
animation a hell of a lot better than live action.
yeah,
Like, as stylistic as Zack Snyder could be, you can't just straight adapt, like, every
right.
panel. As much as we want to, as much as we wanna see it, Like animation is just too perfect for that because it's just like you can do so much more.
Yeah,
Like just look at the Spider-Verse movies, like they just look those landscapes and all those
yeah,
worlds and all that animation, and then live action, do what you can, do what you want to do, obviously, but like just don't like adapt like a whole thing and then like expect like greatness, lightning
yeah,
happening in a bottle again for
yeah,
those
and
stories.
that's exactly what the MCU, I think, when they were at the peak of their game, they were doing exactly that. Like, Captain America: Civil War is nothing like any of the versions of Civil War in the comics. It adapts and takes inspiration from, like, certainly some of the plot points and whatnot, but it's a very different movie. And then even none of the Spider-Man movies have really truly adapted. Well, maybe it's Amazing Spider-Man 2, adopted some key points, but again, the movie is not the comic book. It takes some of those, scenes and plot points and iconic imagery and really, gives that to you. And I think fans still connect with it because clearly, when we had Andrew Garfield come back in Spider-Man No Way Home, that moment when he catches Zendaya's character, who I'm forgetting the name of, but like, like that whole moment, I'm like, yes, I was cheering in the crowd. I'm like, yeah, because I so wish they had done Amazing Spider-Man 3. I love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
so I think hopefully moving forward, the DCU will take its cues kind of, from those successes of the past. Of course, James Gunn being an avid reader of comics, as well as the creative team is assembled. I think the best thing about his creative team is he's got a bunch of comic book writers in there, but he's also got a lot of good filmmakers and storytellers in there. And then, of course, Peter Safran being the person who's like a veteran producer who knows how to manage multi-billion-dollar franchises.
Hmm.
You've got the acumen on all fronts, from the logistical, technical production, creative side, storytelling, writing, and they're doing it from day one. And that's not even something that Marvel had, so they had to sort of like find their way through all the way to Infinity War and Endgame, and they managed to do it really well. And I think so far, having all of those pieces in place for phases 4, 5, and 6, they've sort of fumbled the ball. So like they've shown that maybe you can overplan and then kind of paint yourself into corners and limit your ability to tell good stories by looking maybe too far ahead. But so far, James Gunn and his team, while we haven't really seen anything from them yet, it looks like the plans they have feel far less half cooked. And I mean, they're planning things out, but I think they're still giving themselves enough room, kind of wiggle and let projects breathe, which is a good sign for the universe. So we'll put end it there for now. I think we can talk on this topic
Yeah,
forever.
that's
Superman
we could go on
Legacy,
and on, but
the supporting cast, guys, like, that's let us know in the comments below what you think about Superman Legacy as a project as a whole. It's about to go into production. I think it's into production in March or April, so it's coming up
yeah,
really quickly.
March. Yeah.
So, and it's going to be shooting in Atlanta. I'm sure it's going to be shooting in London and other locations as well. David Cornswith, Richard Brosnahan. You've got, so many other, great actors already on the cast, and I'm sure there's still probably like at least half a dozen, if not more, characters who are going to be a big part of the movie to be cast, as well as probably cameos from, characters like maybe Sean Gunn's iteration of Maxwell Lord, and who knows who else. Maybe Superman Legacy will introduce us to the DCU Batman as well. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, guys. And of course, thanks for joining us here on the show. We really appreciate it. This is something new that we were trying, so hopefully you like it. We're going to be live here each and every day, Monday through Friday, talking about DCU, daily, basically. And you can pitch your topics in the comments and in the live chat, and we'll bring those here and we'll talk about them. We can interact with you guys in the comments. Do definitely leave your comments there, and we'll try to get to your questions and so on and so forth. But until tomorrow, this has been DCU Daily. John, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.